Have you ever been there? You've got this brilliant idea, a totally logical argument, and it just gets shot down. It's got to be one of the most frustrating feelings, right? You know you're right, but you just can't get them to see it. Well, today we're going to change that. We're going to build the architecture of persuasion and look at a method designed to get around those roadblocks and straight to a yes. So let's dive in.
So, let's start with the big question. Why? Why do perfectly good arguments fail? You lay out all the facts, the data is perfect, your reasoning is flawless, and you still get a hard no. Is your logic wrong? Did they just not understand you? Nope. Most of the time, the real reason is something way more human.
And here it is, the #1 killer of good arguments, ego. You see, when you present your case, the other person doesn't always hear your logic. What they hear is a challenge. They hear, you're wrong and I'm right. And at that moment, it stops being about the facts. It becomes about them protecting their ego. They dig their heels in, and boom, the argument is over before it even really started.
But what if there was a way to just sidestep that whole ego defense mechanism? Well, there is, and that's where this really powerful strategy comes into play. We're going to break down something called the big ask method, which is all about reframing the conversation so you can get exactly what you want.
The heart of this method is a classic psychological move, and it has a fantastic name, the door-in-the-face technique. And it's pretty much what it sounds like. You start by making a request that's so big you are fully expecting them to metaphorically slam the door right in your face. That rejection? It's not a failure. It's actually the key to the entire thing.
The process itself is, surprisingly simple. It really just breaks down into 4 easy steps. First, you make your big ask. Now, the key here is that it has to be big, but it still has to be plausible, not completely insane. Step 2, you get that no that you were totally expecting. Step 3, and this is the magic part, you make a concession and offer up your real, much smaller request. And finally, step 4, you secure the agreement you were after all along.
Okay, let's make this real. Imagine you're in a negotiation for a bigger budget. Using this method, you don't go in asking for what you want. You go in big. You say, look, to really crush our goals this year, we're going to need a 30% budget increase. That's your big ask. You know it's a huge lift, and you're totally prepared for them to push back.
So, just as you predicted, they tell you there's no way 30% is happening. Now, you pause, you look thoughtful, then you come back with your concession. Okay, I get it. That's a lot. What if we could figure out how to make it work with just 15%? All of a sudden, that 15%, which was your actual goal from the very beginning, sounds incredibly reasonable.
So why on earth is this so effective? Well, the psychology behind it is just fascinating, and it leans on 2 huge principles. First, you've got the psychology of reciprocity. It's this deep, deep human instinct. When someone gives us something, we feel this powerful need to give something back. By lowering your request from 30 to 15, you've made a concession, and now, subconsciously, they feel like they should meet you halfway. The second thing is the contrast principle. Compared to a shocking 30% ask, 15% seems like a bargain. You've completely reframed their whole idea of what's reasonable.
Okay, so the big ask method is fantastic for those direct negotiations. But what about situations that are a little more complex? Where you need to actually change someone's mind about an idea. For that, we've got to get a little more subtle, a little more elegant. We turn to something I like to call the Socrates trick.
The core idea here is, honestly, it's profound. Instead of trying to force your conclusion onto somebody, you guide them so they discover it on their own. Think about it. People are always way more committed to an idea they believe they came up with themselves. You're not trying to win an argument. You're just the architect of their solution.
So here's how this plays out in the real world. You start with a question that has a super obvious yes answer, something that no sane person could really disagree with. For example, is it important that our team meets its quarterly goals? Of course it is. You've just locked in your first agreement. Easy. Okay, now you build a bridge from that first yes. Your very next question has to logically connect their agreement to what you want to achieve. Something like, and would you agree that launching this project is critical to meeting that goal? If your logic holds up, you've just secured your second yes. You're building this little chain of consensus, one link at a time. And now, the final brilliant move. Instead of telling them what to do next, you empower them. You ask them, so what do you think is the best way for us to move this project forward? You've led them right to the edge, and now you're letting them be the one to suggest the action. Suddenly, it's not your idea anymore. It's theirs.
So let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture here. These aren't just a couple of clever party tricks.
They really represent a total shift in strategy, a whole new way of thinking about what persuasion even is. It's about moving away from this idea of a battle of wills and moving toward a collaborative journey to find an answer.
I mean, just look at the contrast. The old way, the lost by ego path, it's all about direct confrontation. It's about proving someone wrong, about winning the argument. And that's exactly how you trigger their ego. But the strategic path, that's about making smart concessions, about letting them find the answer and building agreement step by step. One of these leads to a dead end. The other leads to a solution.
So, here it is, your new persuasion toolkit. First and most importantly, always identify the ego in the room and then figure out how to sidestep it. Second, don't be afraid to start with a big ask to create that powerful contrast. Third, use that principle of reciprocity by making a strategic concession. And finally, use those leading Socratic questions to guide them, not to force them.
Let's just end on this thought, because it really sums everything up. The goal isn't to be the loudest person in the room or the one with the sharpest comeback. The goal is to be an architect. The best persuaders don't win arguments by tearing down the other person's position. No, they build bridges, piece by piece, that the other person is actually happy to walk across, right to the conclusion you wanted all along.